Hello again. Chris Lee from Southeastern 16 here to talk Texas. We're doing with the Stripe Sports guys today, the Horns Up Texas podcast. Nick Kreider and the crew are going to join us. Before they do, a reminder, all our content is brought to you by BetOnline, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know your stuff. Get in on our $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of $200,000. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino, get in on a game of blackjack or poker, unwind with one of our over 150 slots games. Head to the website today, get in on all the action. Bet online. The game starts here. Nick, you guys got your hands in a lot of stuff. We've had a name change. We've had a lot of things. Update folks on your crew and what you guys are doing.
Yeah, well, good to see you again, Chris. Happy to be finally officially part of the SEC as Texas. But yeah, Nick Kreider here, Josh Fisher and Alex Tassopolos, aka Toss. We are Stripe Sports. We rebranded from the Cherry Stripe to Stripe Sports now to kind of encompass all sports, not just basketball, but baseball, football, a little bit of hockey when we try, and Olympic talk, stuff like that, but pretty broad. And then of course we host the Horns Up Talking Texas show with Longhorn legend Quan Cosby. So if you're a fan of Texas football, you definitely know Quan Cosby is top 5 in Texas receiving yards all time. But we also have a really exciting announcement as well. We just started with ESPN Austin, FM radio, every Saturday pregame show, 9 a.m. Central Time in Austin. And then we do an NFL pregame show, 10 a.m. on Sunday to give you a little bit of betting advice, fantasy football advice, and just preview some NFL matchups. So we debuted last week for the Colorado State game, and we'll be going basically all football season. So excited to be here with you, Chris. And you guys have been doing some great things with Southeastern 16. And, I know you did a little rebrand. It was 14, but now we're 16. Yeah. So we're here where we've talked about it, in the off season, but it's official now.
I think the most impressive work I did all off season was getting all 16 pennants in one spot together without it being a complete train wreck. So thank you. I'll tell you what else looked good. Texas in week 1. I know it's Colorado State. It was 52-0. I know it was supposed to be a blowout. I'm going to go. I'll go Josh, Nick, Toss in order. Just give me a quick thing. I mean, knowing it's Colorado State and you're supposed to win, so it's hard to know what to take away. But give me a thing or two of significance that you took from that one, starting with Josh.
I would say recruiting was the biggest, my biggest takeaway. In both normal recruiting as we all grew up knowing it to be, and then now the kind of new brand of recruiting in the transfer portal. We had a lot of freshmen who were fantastic contributors. Our leading receiver and our leading rusher were both pure freshman recruits, Ryan Wingo and Jerrick Gibson. And then in the transfer portal, Golden had 2 touchdowns. He came over from Houston. Bond had a touchdown. And then we had in the punt game, Silas Bolden only had 1 catch from Oregon State, but he flipped the field in the punt game and showed what a force he could be for special teams for us. So Sark demonstrated that he's able to nab the right guys that fit our system and fit our needs, especially on offense in the transfer portal, and then bring in the top recruits and get them acclimated quickly and make them playable. Like, just because these guys are 5-star guys, we've seen in the past, like last year, we had a couple 5-star guys that really didn't see the field much, and we ran a really tight offense and a really tight group. This week 1, it really opened up a lot, and a lot of, former 5-stars and new 5-stars and transfer portal guys got to see some time on offense and then on defense as well. So the biggest takeaway for me was Sark getting the right guys in the portal and the recruiting class, and not only getting them, but putting them out on the field and putting them to their best use and putting them in the best position to succeed. So the recruiting cycle was a big one for us, and it's great to see it come to fruition because it's not always the case, i.e. A&M, what we saw a couple years ago, having the greatest recruiting class on paper of all time, and nothing ever came of it. In fact, their entire roster and program got flipped up on side its head. So it's great to see Sark not only get it on paper, but put it out on the field.
Yeah, I think for me is depth. Especially in the wide receiver room, seeing how many guys caught passes there, how many guys were rotating in and out and making big impacts. I mean, as we all know, this wide receiver room departed A.D. Mitchell, Jordan Whittington, and Xavier Worthy, but we've gained a lot in the transfer portal with Bolden, Golden, Bond, and of course the freshmen that have been brought in as well. So super excited with all the depth there, but also just defensive depth as well. Maybe Texas defense is a lot better than people thought they were. Look, pitching a shutout in any college football game is impressive. Doesn't matter who you're playing. And I know there was a few shutouts in the SEC schedule this week, but let's be honest, we weren't playing Arkansas Pine Bluff like one of the other teams was. We were playing Colorado State, and they were a pretty decent team last year that gave a lot of teams a good run for their money. They knocked off Boise State midseason. They beat San Diego State and Nevada. These are teams that are bowl eligible, and took a Colorado team to double overtime. So, it was impressive. And the fact that we were able to do it all 4 quarters, because sometimes you build a hefty lead, 52-0. You start putting in, the walk-ons, the third strings, the fourth strings to get guys playing time, when you don't know if they're going to play the rest of the season. And so naturally, sometimes the other team leaves their starters in and they try to at least get some there, but it got a little dicey at the end, and we got a red zone pick and preserve the shutout. And that's something, that I know fans love to see, and, obviously players love to see, but in that locker room itself, as a former player, especially playing on defense, there's so much pride that goes into pitching a shutout for that entire defense. That instills a lot of confidence for them going forward in the season. I know that some teams, whether it be high school level or middle school or even college level, maybe even the pros, where there's incentives for pitching a shutout, where it's like, okay, you know what? You guys pitch a shutout, we're taking the day off tomorrow. Like that's how the mindset is. So you get rewarded with good play. But I think that all just has to say that we're incredibly deep on all sides of the ball. I was particularly impressed with our defensive backs, because that was definitely a weakness for us last year. And it looks to be that, our defensive backs were locking people down left and right. The one thing I was concerned with, and I think we expressed interest in this in our Horns Up Talking Texas show, was the lack of pressure that we got to the quarterback, 0 sacks. And so it's not, obviously not the biggest deal in the world, because you still pitched a shutout, but in the SEC, you want to create some pressure, especially for those top tier programs and those quarterbacks. And, if we're going to do that, you got to get a few sacks a game.
Yeah. I love the depth point. I think we had over 60 different players play in that game. And as you watched, in the last 7 to 10 years, 15 years, I guess, for Alabama, their dominance, Georgia's dominance, when they play lesser teams, they give an opportunity to the number 3 and 4 guys on the roster at a particular position to get that run, to get that experience. And so I was grateful that we had a lot of opportunity for some of our guys that won't necessarily get to play when we get into conference play. In particular, I loved how both of our quarterbacks played. Obviously, there was a lot of conversations about Arch Manning, Quinn Ewers. Does he have the stuff to be a first-round pick in the NFL draft, to be a Heisman front runner? There was a possibility that we could have dominated Colorado State. Quinn might have been taken out. We were up 27-0, and he had a decent showing. And then there would have been murmurs about Arch and him coming in and playing really well. But more than anything of what I saw on Sunday and Monday after the game were 2 throws that Quinn made. One, a no-look pass that ended up as a touchdown, and another, a deep out to the right side of the field to Matthew Golden. Both actually touchdown passes to Matthew Golden, where they were elite NFL-esque throws from our starting quarterback, Quinn Ewers. And I think anyone who is an NFL evaluator will say, out of the top 5 quarterbacks currently, after 1 week of play, Quinn Ewers is there. He's in the top 3, he's in the top 5. Take your pick, but he's there. And then Arch came in and did his thing too, and he had 2 touchdowns. So Quinn shut up the haters, and Arch, excited the rest of the Horns fans, and that's really all I can ask for in a dominant win like that. But the quarterbacks will continue to be a conversation point, of course, and especially after that Dr. Pepper commercial with Quinn, where he said he didn't need backup, right? In that Fansville commercial, he didn't need backup, but our backup's darn good. And so it was great to see.
Yeah. You guys both, I guess you all did, touched on what I noticed. Like when I look at that box score, it's like looking at a Georgia box score where they're completing passes to 10 different guys and 7 different guys rush the ball. And that's just, in a normal game. I think that stood out. Obviously, the quarterback depth, a big thing too. Sometimes that creates problems, but I think that's the thing, guys. And Toss, I'll start with you. and work backwards this time. To me, that depth, like I'm not picking on them, but it just comes to mind. Like Tennessee, if Nico gets hurt, what do they do as a backup? And Texas obviously is in a great situation in the quarterback room. But to me, that's where Georgia started building its dominance, because it's like you lose all these guys in the NFL draft. It's just next man up. And it felt to me like they didn't lose a step, and it might not be household names that did it, but it's starting to get a little bit of that Georgia-like feel. And Josh, you touched it on at the start. You said recruiting. But that includes the portal too. It feels like they're starting to build. I'm not going to call them Georgia yet, but it feels like they're starting to build a little bit of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Josh is definitely right to bring up the portal, the team that Georgia beat, right? They're the only power conference team, the Clemson Tigers, who brought in zero players in the portal. And who knows if that would have made a difference against Georgia, but it certainly doesn't help. And if you've been paying attention to the Texas Longhorns, you're probably likely to know that who was supposed to be our starting running back, CJ Baxter, got hurt in August. And Velton Gardner, a guy that we transferred in after that injury 2 weeks before the season started, he did get some run in the game. I don't think he's going to be our starting running back, but all that to say, our staff was ready to go. They have had conversations, and even the guys that they don't end up bringing into the 40 acres, they're still doing what needs to be done from a recruiting standpoint in the portal. And we brought in extra depth after that injury, even as close as it was to week 1. So the transfer portal is huge. Continuing to keep the talent that we end up recruiting in Austin, like we have done with Arch Manning thus far. Obviously, everyone outside of Austin thinks that he's going to transfer, and it's not going to change. Week 6, even if we're 6-0, it's not going to change. They're still going to be saying that Arch Manning isn't getting enough PT and he's going to go somewhere else. But if you breed that winning culture, that's what gets guys to stay. And if they only need one season to put up numbers that can get them onto an NFL roster, they don't care about transferring, because ultimately they're playing for a team that's vying for a national championship and an SEC championship every single year. And then they're potentially in a great place to get onto an NFL team and make a lot of money for their family, for themselves, for future generations. So we're playing the game the right way. And again, we haven't played an SEC conference team yet. And so we're yet to be tested, obviously, this year. But I think building the foundation last year, getting to the college football playoff, and I said it to these other two guys, Chris, when we did our preview show, we still have more things to prove, right? Kirby didn't get to the college football playoff and win a national championship in his first go around. And it takes losing in those biggest games to then learn how to win those games. And then you got to go and do it, right? That's something we're really looking at Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss this year. Can they do it against the biggest and toughest opponents? Yes, they're incredibly talented. Jackson Dart's in that top 5 QB class that I mentioned, Quinn Ewers in as well. But can they get over the hump? I'm glad we got to the college football playoff last year, and I feel optimistic and confident that we'll be right back there, and we'll have a chance to prove ourselves against really tough competition.
Yeah, and that just goes back, like we mentioned, to the depth. Like, for so many years of us being Texas fans and being students, and myself, being a walk-on there, like I would always compare us to, or not compare us, but I would look at the Bamas and the Georgias, and I would say, look how deep they are, right? Jalen Hurts goes out, Tua Tagovailoa comes in, right? And then they go in and they replace him, right away and get a national championship. And same thing with the receiving room. You've got Judy and you got Ruggs, and you got just keep it going with guy after guy. You got Devontae Smith, and you just need to continue to do that on every level, at every position, where you have a next man up that is ready to roll, that's ready to play, that is talented and can basically compete with almost as much as the guy ahead of him. And I really think that they've done a great job of just always being ready for those situations in the portal and in recruiting. And, obviously it does help that you're moving over to the SEC. It's a stronger conference. You get more eyes on you. And of course, NIL is nice as well, especially when you're a school like Texas, when you're able to give money to all these players. I mean, I'm not going to lie, we have the luxury of being able to do that. Colorado State can't do that. If anything, I mean, I don't know if you guys saw this, but there's in week 1, Colorado State, I think, made like $1.4 million for playing Texas. Texas pays Colorado State to do that. And I think Bama does the same. And, all these teams basically pay schools to hand over a butt whooping. And so, that's fine. But at the end of the day, like you said, Chris, like this reminded me so much of a Georgia team where everyone's getting some playing time and basically just kind of putting the hammer down and showing people what's up. And, hopefully this is the shoe-in where we're, have the right motivation and the right confidence to go into Michigan and do something similar. I mean, obviously it's not going to be 52-0, but, I expect our defense to be prepared as ever, and I expect our offense to come out firing. I mean, the over-under for this game is pretty low, if we're being completely honest. I mean, I think that a lot of it's credited to the fact that we have a good defense, and Michigan's got a good defense too, but we're a team that just hung 52 points, and we're sitting here looking at the over-under being 42.5. So, Josh, what do you got for us?
Yeah, no, I think I'm lockstep with you guys. Of course, it's something we discuss on our show, and the Georgia point is something we also brought up. And we're not there yet, right? They've got a couple national championships. They've been the proven cycle of next man up each year in and year out. But this is the first year, this past season, where we went to the playoff. We put a bunch of guys out to the NFL draft, and now we have the opportunity to see, hey, are we really and look, week 1, great. We have to see it throughout the season. We have a huge test against Michigan, massive test coming up in the SEC, even if we have one of the quote unquote lighter SEC schedules there are. Now is the test to see, hey, were you really able to replenish? So if we come into the season, right, and it's like, we went to the playoff last year, a bunch of guys got drafted, and then the following year, we went back to the playoff. We replaced all those guys and replaced their production and went back to the playoff again. Then we're in a great cycle like the Georgias, the Alabamas of the world. Because realistically, and I'll even throw in the LSUs in there, because those have been the most consistent competitive teams. In Ohio State, of course, right? Day hasn't gotten one, but they've been in the mix in Michigan too. But those are teams that are always able to replenish and get back there on a consistent basis and play the new game the right way. Toss mentioning Dabo Swinney and Clemson. Obviously, you either get aboard the train or you get hit by it. And right now, Dabo is getting hit by the train. So you got to get with the times. I'll say that, quarterbacks are always going to be the talk of the town. That's just the way the game works, any level of football, right? Especially when you have the two guys in the room that we have, one of them having a massive last name, the other one having a massive NIL deal, and one of the biggest recruits in the history of the sport, right? Coming out of high school, and he's going to have major draft stock. I'm really stoked about the depth in our defensive backfield and defense and offensive line and receiving room. How many years have we seen? Yes, Georgia, Carson Beck's a great quarterback, and he'll probably be a first-round pick. But I believe the last first-round pick at quarterback Georgia had was Matthew Stafford, and we had a couple ballers in between them. We had a couple guys who were really good at slinging that rock. Bennett has titles, right? Multiple. Fromm, right? Murray. These guys were in between them, and they were really good at playing that quarterback position for the Bulldogs. But they've only had 2 first-round picks in a 15-year span, I believe. So yet in between that span, how many defensive players, offensive linemen, wide receivers, guys taken, outside of the quarterback spot. So I'm really stoked about our depth in the positions that are at least talked about, being the defensive backfield and offensive line. And that, again, just, back to that original point, Sark left that Arkansas game a couple years ago. It's the most important game to me in my tenure as a Texas Longhorn, covering the team, being a fan of the team. Most important game is that Arkansas game a couple years ago where we went to Fayetteville and got absolutely smacked. I think Sark looked at that team and goes, wait a second, we were not ready for the SEC. We were not ready to be in that playoff. We're weak on the line. We're weak on the defensive side of the football. And he completely transformed our team. And now we're one of those potential powerhouses where we can replenish year in and year out, where guys want to come get the NIL, guys want to come suit up for Texas again. And we're on the right side of history, it's looking like, for our program. So I'm really, just to echo these guys, stoked that we're on the right path, not at the Georgia Bama level yet, but on the right path to have that depth, not only this year, but year in and year out.
All right, Nick, I'm going to give you first crack this time, then Josh, then Toss. Biggest concern for the Michigan game, whether that be Michigan, I think that defense is really good. I was looking at Athlon today. Michigan's defensive line, linebackers, and I think secondary all rated in the top 8 position groups in the country. or maybe something with Texas that you see that's a concern at this point. But I'm really looking forward to that matchup, and that side when the Texas offense against the defense to me is the most interesting part. But give me maybe your biggest concern going into that matchup.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say it's anything to do with Michigan's talent. I mean, obviously they're always going to be talented, and we're going to face just as talented teams all season long. I was really impressed with our offensive line. They're getting pushed back every single, play and beating the defensive line off the jump every time. So I imagine it's going to be a really good fight in the trenches. We returned 4 of our 5 offensive starting linemen. And if we're going to be completely honest, like these guys know that my least favorite of the offensive linemen is the one that left, Christian Jones. He was the most penalized player on our team. So, we beef up the starting line, if anything, and they get more years of experience and they get bigger and stronger. So I like where our offensive line's at. So I don't know if it's going to be that big of an issue for us, but I think in reverse, as I mentioned, getting no sacks against Colorado State, that is something that I do want to see more of. And that's a little bit my concern because Michigan does have a good O-line as well. And I want to continue to instill confidence in the defensive line that we have, and getting to an experienced quarterback in Warren, a guy that wasn't even really supposed to be named the starter. I mean, I think everyone thought Alex Orji was going to be their guy, and we'll see. I mean, they might flip-flop, throughout the season. We've seen that happen before. I know some teams are doing that, but, getting in there and trying to create havoc and make a guy feel uncomfortable, that's going to be the biggest thing. And if we're not able to do that, we create more time for him to get the ball to his receivers and his talented tight end. I mean, I think Loveland is one of the best tight ends in the nation. So, being able to, match up with him and not give that quarterback any time should be something that we need to be really focused on here. And just playing a clean game. Yes, you like I said, pitched a shutout, but if I'm being completely honest, like the one thing that besides the sacks that Texas always has that I see every single game is starting slow, right? Our first drive, we punted, and of course, like whatever, you're going to punt every now and then, but that is something that we're so used to seeing as Texas fans, where we go 3 and out, or we get 1 first down, then we punt. And, you want to go into the big house, you want to go to Michigan, and you want to immediately run it down their throat and score right away. I don't want to settle for a punt or a turnover on the first drive. So starting off hot, getting to the quarterback, and playing clean football.
Yeah. I mean, I'm again agreement on all those things. It's it's eerily similar to the Bama situation, where I think this Michigan team is going to get better as the year goes on. They're going to get more acclimated under center at the head coaching spot, although obviously he had a great run last year with Harbaugh serving suspensions. But last year we went to a Bama team that was not the same Bama team that we saw at the end of the year. Clearly, they were vastly improved. So I think fortunately played Michigan earlier rather than later. I'll say that. Unfortunately, the big house is an advantage. Like, we're going into their house as the favorites, and we should be, based off what we saw from week 1, based off, what we returned. But, again, like going to that kind of atmosphere, they are the defending national champions. Now they are the underdog in week 2 early at home against us. So that's definitely something that's on the back of my mind, and just, running the football. Donovan Edwards had a really tough week 1. I can't imagine that he's going to have a really tough week in and week out. He's a special player, and I want to give him that respect going into this week. And I'd have to imagine this Michigan team, and the Nick brought up the over under, and the reason it's so low, like astronomically low for a college football game, especially with, with an offense like ours, I'd like to think where it's a pass happy offense. I think Michigan's going to try to run the football, control time of possession, and get in and get out of this football game. The old Patriot way, kind of like Belichick, just play some good defense, run the football, and get the heck out of there, right? Like we don't need to reinvent the wheel here to beat this Texas team. So really, just stuffing that run and making it really tough for whoever is under center to force them to throw the ball and not being able to run, like we've seen quarterbacks burn us in the past. Make it tough for Donovan Edwards, and then like Nick's saying, start out hot. Quinn peppering guys, getting everybody involved quickly from the wide receiver room, and scoring early and often. So it forces Michigan to have to throw the ball earlier than they want to or anticipated doing. And then I think that's where, our defensive linemen, our pass rushers, and our defensive backfield, I think that's where they're going to shine on Saturday.
Yeah, I don't have much else to add. I love the point about Donovan Edwards coming off of a rough week last week. They're going to, like Josh said, they're going to try and dictate how the game is played. Michigan is both teams, honestly, early. But if Texas scores and it's 7-0, that gives extra juice to our defense. And we're one of those teams. And I think we're going to demonstrate this throughout the season, where if you give us too many opportunities, we will make you pay. And that's what Michigan will attempt to do, is limit the amount of opportunities. And especially with the rule change last year, where the clock doesn't stop after a first down until we're under 2 minutes. That benefits teams that want to run the football like Michigan wants to. I think Nick's absolutely right. They're probably going to flip-flop on quarterbacks throughout the entire season. We know how to play. A lot of turnover, obviously, on the defensive side of football, but we know how to play quarterbacks like Alex Orji if he is in there, because we played Jalen Milroe incredibly well when we were on the road, and we limited him as a runner and made him beat us with his arm, and he was not able to do that. I feel more confident that Orji is not even as developed as Jalen Milroe was last year as a passer, and the guy that is likely going to start can't run as well as Orji can. So then it's about what Nick's talking about, getting the pressure on him and making him pay, and not giving him enough time. I see the same kind of cracks in our armor that the rest of these guys are talking about. We have a lot of young, talented players who didn't have to travel on the road to an opposing stadium that makes a lot of noise. So maybe we'll see a couple more turnover or a couple more penalties from some of our young guys. You know, you would expect maybe a couple more mistakes there, but I have the utmost confidence that these guys are coached up in a way where they're going to be ready to play the Michigan Wolverines. And again, our receiving core is too twitchy, too quick, too fast. And if they get the opportunities, I don't care who the opposing DBs are, we're going to make them pay. So I think it's going to be a tough game for Michigan. It really is. And it's hard to say because we're going to the big house, but I don't know, Chris. I'm confident. I just am.
Yeah, I'm spoiler alert. I'm confident in you guys in this one too. But I want to ask you. I think offensively, the one question I have, and I'll go Tosh, Josh, Nick on this one. Running the ball, what's it look like? Obviously, the Baxter loss changed things. They ran the ball pretty well. I think they ran 6 yards a carry. Colorado State maybe a little better. Had a couple of backs that ran pretty well. What's it look like against Michigan? What's it looks like by season's end for this running back room?
It's a good thing to bring up because it's certainly something Michigan will try and force Texas to do, is run between the tackles, because that's likely where they expect our weakest position group to be and the weakest skill set within that position group. I do think our true freshman, Jerrick Gibson, ran between the tackles incredibly well. He led the team in rushing. And I think by nature of what the spread offense looks like now, you can't just limit a team that's as versatile as Texas to running between the tackles. We have too many options with quick screens to the outside, sending Jaydon Blue out in the flat, halfback screen, double wide receiver screens. Like we have too many things at our disposal, too many things that we could run from a playbook standpoint that truly worry me from a running standpoint, because those are all extensions of the run game. And we will use every single one of them throughout the entire season, whether we had Baxter or not, because that's the type of deep bag of tricks type of play caller that Steve Sarkisian is. I expect our running back room to look solid throughout the entire season. We won't be the nation's best, but we're an 8 out of 10. And I don't think that anyone, because of the reasons that I mentioned about the screen game, is going to exploit us and make us look silly and hold us to 20 yards rushing. Because if they hold us to 20 yards rushing, then Jaydon Blue had 60 yards in the receiving game. And it's because he's catching those passes out of the backfield.
Yeah, we still ran for almost 200 yards last Saturday. You know what I'm saying? So again, look, the issue is glaring. Like, if there was one thing to pinpoint for this Texas team, it's they don't have a true premier back. And it was supposed to be CJ Baxter, with Jaydon Blue as the 1B or the second back, and Wisner as a scat back. And Wisner's trying to fill that role as the number 2, but he's still a scat back. We all really like Jerrick Gibson. I think it's going to take a couple more weeks to get his sea legs and hopefully, demonstrate himself as the premier back, even though he's a freshman. We're definitely thin at that area and definitely devoid of a true superstar back like you've seen on Boise State, like you'll see when ETN comes back for Georgia, like the Ohio State dynamic duo has. There are a number of programs that have these premier running backs. I don't think we're one of them, unfortunately, this year. All that being said, Sark's an offensive guru, mastermind, however you want to tab him. He knows, everyone knows the issue, so he's going to scheme against it, right? He's going to open the field, like Toss is saying, with the screens, hitting guys in the flat, with the reverses, right? With our wide receivers, getting them involved in the run game, really open that field up. So the defense has to open up, and you can't stack the box, and you can't try to, force us to run the ball up the middle. We're going to really open things up, and it's going to make things easier to go between the tackles for our running backs. And again, mix things up. We have so much speed. We have so much athleticism on the offensive side of the football that we can mask us not having a true bona fide superstar running back to start the season. So yes, it's an issue. Yes, it's our biggest weakness, but it's not something that worries me. They have Mason Graham and Will Johnson, who are going to be top 10 picks if they stay healthy in the NFL draft. But other than that, they have a lot of turnover on this team. Like, they have less experience despite winning a national championship, they have less experience starting than we do, a lot. So I feel good outside of their top heavy defensive superstars and our ability to dominate them athletically and open up the run game for our guys to once again mask us not having that ETN, Judkins, and Henderson type back this season.
Yeah. I think this game against Colorado State kind of was more of an audition for these running backs more than anything. I mean, yes, of course, it's great to get everyone some love. You even see some walk-ons getting some carries as well. But I do think that, Gibson didn't start this game. It was Jaydon Blue and Trey Wisner. And then they started seeing, Gibson bust out some big runs. And they said, okay, let's see what else the kid can do. Let's give him some more carries. And as you saw, he was our leading rusher. Obviously, Jaydon Blue is probably going to be the guy that gets the bulk of the load there. But look, I'd mentioned to these guys that Gibson, although he's a freshman, he's a big body freshman that played at IMG Academy, somewhere that is used to playing against D1 recruits all season long. It's not like, you're playing 2A Texas football or, even like 5A where you're playing against some kids who, are cool just getting an academic scholarship somewhere, somewhere in the state. They're not playing football after their senior year of high school. Gibson's playing against guys that are playing at the next level, week in and week out in high school. And so he's ready. And CJ Baxter was, slotted in to be our starter last year as a freshman. So it's not unheard of. But I do think it was an audition to see who can get in there and who can be the workhorse for us and who can be, the gadget guys, who can be the third down back, who can be the pass catchers, who's good in pass block. And that's why you saw so many different running backs play. Ryan Niblack, he's a guy that we loved, coming out of a recruiting class that was slotted in to be a wide receiver and one of the fastest wide receivers in the room. And it sounds like he's been making the switch to get over play running back. And he had 3 carries for 12 yards, even sporting the number 21. So, he's got a running back number now. And I think he's welcoming that in. And we saw something similar a couple years ago with Roschon Johnson. He came in as a quarterback for us. And, we talked about how Vanderbilt, before the show, Nate Johnson doesn't want to switch over to wide receiver because, he wants to play quarterback. He's probably, getting paid money to play quarterback. But Roschon Johnson was a guy who put the team before himself, and now he's an NFL running back. And, Ryan Niblack can be someone similar like that, starting off as a wide receiver, now a running back. So, like I said, audition here to see who's got what, because, you're at that part right now in your practices where you're not going 100% full contact, full pads. Like you're only gonna be able to see what a guy's got in game. And so this was the perfect game to do that and see who can basically be the guy to man the ship. But it's going to be running back by committee. I think Jaydon Blue and Jerrick Gibson are the 2 guys to be focused on, though.
Yeah.
I think we got you muted.
You're muted, Chris.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm going to do rapid fire round here. I'll go Josh, Nick, Toss, and I'm going to return to the Michigan game for picking some analysis at the end. But leading rusher by season's end is who? Starting with Josh.
Gibson.
Nick?
I also think Gibson.
I think it's going to be Jaydon Blue.
Okay. And welcome to the confusion I have when I look at this roster. I just see so much depth; it's hard to know how it sorts out. All right, leading receiver by the end of the year, again, starting with Josh.
That's the tough question. We're all gonna have different answers here.
Yeah, I know who Nick's gonna say, so I won't say him. I love Bond. I love his touchdown celly. I like Bond. I'm gonna go Bond. I like Bond.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Matthew Golden. He's a guy that torched us last year when we played against Houston for a couple of touchdowns, and it's one of those situations where we'd rather have that guy on our roster than play against him. And I think he's got blazing speed. He's a big body, and runs really clean routes. I mean, all these guys can be the guy. I just feel like Golden is the guy in my mind. I mean, he had 2 touchdowns for us. Only 3 receptions. Like to see him get more targets, but I think my mind says Golden.
I think these guys are both right. You asked us yards, right? I think we're
catches
looking
at Silas Bolden, right?
No.
Well, yeah. Well, Bolden only had 1 catch this last game. I think catches probably Bond. I think Bond probably gets the amount of catches. I think yards.
They've got Bolden in the slot, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But we mix in so many different guys. No, I'm gonna break down each category very quickly. I think that I agree with Josh in yards. I think that Bond will lead us in yards. I think Golden will lead us in touchdowns, and I think Golden will lead us in receptions. So to Nick's point, I think he will become more of Quinn's go-to target, in particular in the red zone. But I think for eating yards just from 30 to 30, it feels like Bond is a good pick to do that work. And of course, we've got our dark horse freshman, Ryan Wingo, who led our team in receiving yards in game 1. I just think that when we get to better competition, his inexperience will show a little bit, and we'll end up trusting those transfers that have played a ton of college football at this point.
Yeah.
Okay, here's another good one. And I'll start with Josh. Which tight end leads him in catches, Helm or Niblack?
It's tough to not go Helm right now. Like I like Niblack. I was stoked about him again. Like you talk about like getting guys like it's the beauty of the transfer portal. When you get guys who just have experience, right? They've played college football before. It's massive bringing that in. Juan Davis got a catch, which was like Nick literally just goes, "Whoa, Juan Davis!" When we were watching the game, like that's how many guys were getting involved early. Helm, it could be a Stover type situation like we saw in Ohio State last year, where he wasn't best athlete in the world, but was just consistent, got open, and did his job and was just a good safety valve and safety blanket and had a couple big plays here and there throughout the game. And I think him and Quinn's relationship is going to prove to lead him in the tight end room for us. So I'm going to go with the incumbent Helm.
I'm going to say Helm too. I just think if you're just looking at the snap count and seeing how many people, or how many snaps he got in comparison, didn't see Niblack on the field as much, but Helm's the guy that's been there that Quinn already has a rapport with. So go with Helm.
Yeah, three yeses for Helm. He's going to Hollywood. I think he's our first pick as far as guys that we're using in 12-man personnel when we go with that kind of group. He is bigger. He is a better blocker, and he knows the offense from last year. Like Josh mentioned, he's incumbent. He has that relationship with Quinn. He had some flashes last year where we were really impressed. And I think part of none of us mentioned this when we were talking about our running backs. Part of the reason why I'm so confident in what we're going to be able to do with whoever is in that backfield, whichever guy it is because we can run 13-man personnel and have Niblack and Helm out there, and we can bully guys. And if they're not out there, our offensive line needs to show that it is one of the best groups in football. And they did that in game 1, and I look forward to seeing them doing that on the road in Ann Arbor against Michigan. But at a certain point, if your offensive line's good enough, it doesn't really matter who's back there as long as they can break down one guy.
I think the thing with Helm, just really quickly, is that you're just the eye test if you're looking at him.
Yeah.
He looks like he's playing right tackle. He's 6'5", listed 250. And like we're used to Javian Sanders, who a little leaner. I think Javian was like 6'3", maybe 6'4", but leaner, faster. Helm's a big body, doesn't really move as quick, but Look at Gronkowski. I mean, he was a big dude, and I feel like the eye test like makes you say like, okay, like is he an actually good athletic tight end, or is he just a really big body? And he's made some outstanding catches, and gets open. So I got to put my money on him.
Well, and Nick, from what I watched, it looks like they've got a little rapport. I just figured I'd seen Niblack at Alabama. He's a stud. Like I could see him developing into like a first round tight end. He's kind of got that explosive gear. But I mean, that's why when I watch them from afar, it's so hard to figure out who's going to emerge. They just have got dudes everywhere, and that's one reason I asked you that, because like I want to hear how you guys attack that. That to me, look, they got two really good options.
Hopefully, they go for 50 catches and 50 catches.
Yeah, well, you might have a couple receivers that are wanting to share at that point, but the Bolden thing surprised me too, guys. And Josh, I'll direct this one to you. I mean, he was, in terms of catches, he was the leading guy on this team in terms of where he got his catches last year. He's caught 54 balls at Oregon State. But to me, a guy like that kind of gets squeezed out at the top of the order, again, just a sign of the talent they've got.
Yeah, I mean, one guy we haven't even brought up is Jonte Cook, who's a former 5-star recruit who had a really good Saturday. So, like, there's just, again, so many guys and so many mouths to feed. It's like I'm trying to give it a comp in like in another sport.
Yeah, maybe like a Pro Bowl where like everyone has to play.
Yeah, it's like when you like, it's gonna the competition's gonna get tougher, right? So you're not gonna see this kind of production week in and week out. I mean, hopefully you do. Hopefully you are this team that are these guys. I will say that it's like having a great basketball team where one night it's so and so, another night it's this guy, and that's how it's gonna be throughout the season. And people play unselfish and know that they're going to get their shot once every couple games. Like if we're sitting here and Bolden has 5 catches, 80 yards and a touchdown, we're not going to be shocked. He's that kind of explosive player. He was huge in the return game. Like we had to, not only do we have to fill Worthy's shoes in the pass catching game, we had to fill it in the return game too. And Bolden did that. He flipped the field in special teams, and having that experience back there and on the punt return is massive.
Yeah. It's interesting how I could imagine conversations in the locker room to maintain players who are returners and receivers, how you can now say, look, if you want to get to the next level, this is becoming a bigger commodity than it used to be with the new return rules, right? Where you could potentially keep a guy on the hook and say, look, we're not going to run. I mean, this is not the case with Bolden, but with another team, you could say, okay, you're not going to be the 1, 2, or 3, but you're taking every punt return, you're taking every kick return. And you're our number 4 receiver, so you're going to get some looks when we go 4 out. And where in past, maybe a kid might think like, I feel like I'm getting the short end of the stick here because I feel like I deserve to be a receiver. Yeah. But you could frame it in a way where you say, if you are the best returner in the nation, that is so valuable now for an NFL team in a way that it didn't used to be, because of these new rule changes. So it's interesting how I can imagine those conversations progressing.
All right. Rapid fire round continues on the way out here. Defensive MVP by season's end. I'll go Josh, Nick, Toss.
Man,
I think this is easy for me.
I'm gonna go Barron, our safety, Jaydon Barron. Okay.
I think Anthony Hill Jr. I mean, 5-star recruit coming out of high school, played well as a freshman last year, but he's gonna get the Harold Perkins love that he's getting at LSU. Like he's one of those guys that is gonna find himself in the first round after his junior season next year.
Yeah, I agree with Nick, and dare I say a player who is on the trajectory to being a more productive Harold Perkins. A guy that is not only present in name and in swag on the field, but in productivity also is consistent. And our pursuit was something that I really was keyed in on. No, we didn't have sacks, but we did have a decent amount of tackle for losses. And part of that is because of our 2 linebackers, Colin Simmons, the true freshman, and Anthony Hill, who, if given open space, they get on a guy like that and they always bring him down. But yeah, I mean, another guy that I'll throw out there who had kind of a quiet first game is Muhammad, our DB. His brother obviously was tremendous last year. He was a freshman last year. I wouldn't be shocked if in 7 weeks everyone's saying this is one of the guys that's going to be a first round pick as a defensive backfield, as a corner to next year in next year's draft.
All right, same order. Give me your Michigan score.
28-13. We go under and cover. I think the under to me is like a lock. I look at just for anyone who's a better out there. Like I look at 43.5, and that is so low that we always in our show, like, what does Vegas want you to do? And Vegas is licking their chops for everyone to take the over on that. Currently, the bet amount versus the sharp money amount is a 25% difference. And that's so huge with money coming in on the under versus the public taking the under. So I think the game's going under. We put up 28 points. I could see a similar situation to like Georgia Clemson, where defenses kind of start out hot and it takes a little second for us to get going. But once we get revved up and that engine and that, that offense is flowing with Quinn and the receivers, I think it's too much for Michigan to keep up with. And I don't think they really get anything started defensively because we just threw 3 different defensive players out there in 2 different, sections of the defense. And I think it's going to be a lot for Michigan. And I think 28-13 with 13 being generous.
So you said the under is now 41?
42.5, I think Nick had. I have it at 43.5. So I think, but even 41.5, that game still goes under at 28-13.
So that's 24, 25, 18-ish, I guess.
If you want to game a field goals,
score.
Chris. Yeah. If you want, I'm just kicking, dude.
Well, no, I'm working backwards from the math of the spread and the over under. So I'm having a harder time figuring out how Michigan gets to that number.
Okay, yeah. So if you're having a tough time figuring out how Michigan gets there, but I do respect their defense and their home atmosphere, that's how I'm getting to the under and us covering.
Yeah. Nick?
Yeah, I'm a little maybe a little more liberal with this one. I think I'm going to say 34-10 Texas.
Ooh.
I think it's going to be a butt whooping.
Ugly.
I think it's going to be a butt whooping.
You really think it's going to be that ugly?
Yeah, and I think Michigan fans think that too, the ones I've talked to.
I don't care what they think. They suck. No, seriously. I think they're a weak fan base. Kind of lame. Not like Aggie bad, but they're bottom tier for me. You really think we're going to beat? Sorry to get before to cut you T, but like
I think we're going to breaks off them. They don't have they don't know who their quarterback is.
Yeah, I agree.
They don't.
It's a problem when you can't score.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was about to say, Josh, is the way that you laid it out, if both defensives start hot, I don't like that for us. But if we score early, like Nick and I are asking for, it's not that I like it more if we score on our first drive. I'm like,
love that.
Okay, good luck stopping us. If we score on our first drive, to me, that'll be a first or second drive, right? As long as we don't go 3 and out on our first drive. But
this isn't going to be an A&M Notre Dame game. I'll tell you that right now. That game was a snooze fest, and no one could move the ball.
Yes, but I think it's an anomaly. We know it's an anomaly for us to start hot. So I think I could see, like, that's why I said the Georgia thing where it took back a second and the Georgia offense a second to get going. So ultimately they came through. So I think that we're going to come through when push comes to shove and put them away. We didn't get your score prediction team, but Nick's is that would be embarrassing for them.
Yeah, mine's somewhere in between, still quite embarrassing for them. But on the premise that if we score early, 28 feels too low for our offense. So I have 36-19. We go for 2 one time. They kick 4 field goals and score 1 touchdown. Is what I'm going with there. Chris loved the field goals. I like it too. Like, I like our defense to do just enough, but they have an incredibly competent kicker. And if they're going to be taking points, because in a game like this, you have to take them in as many opportunities as you have. But I like our offense to score a lot in this one. So that would take it over.
Nasty.
Yeah, he's really good. I have him going 4 for 4 on the day. So I'm buying him.
He's got a horse leg, that guy.
Yeah.
What about you, Chris?
All right.
Chris, where are you set, dude?
Well, I took them to win. Like I said, I work backwards on the math on the over under because I think it was, gosh. So if it's 43 and it's a 7-point spread, then it's what? It's a 25 to 19ish type game, something. I mean,
right.
You know what I mean? Again, I have a hard time seeing Michigan approaching 20 points. The question to me is what do you guys do? Can you get 30 on them? I don't know. It feels to me like maybe a 30-17 type game.
Okay, validate me.
28-14. I don't know.
Let me get some help from you. You've covered this for, you've covered SEC for a bit, right? And your coverage of the SEC.
Yeah.
For an SEC team going up against a team of this caliber, wouldn't you not say 43.5 is an insanely low total?
Yeah, for the way the SEC's put up points lately. But I mean, also here's interesting, and I guess it's I'm getting a little in the weeds here. SEC pitched a lot of shutouts last week too, guys. I found that kind of interesting, and I feel like Bishop Sycamore was on the schedule like 10 times, but still, I mean, you can like give up a score by accident, a DB slip. So you know what I mean?
Right.
That's just something I've kind of got an eye on. Is just that you had all these insane point totals, and then you're beating somebody by 60, man. You're getting your scout team reps. The guys that are never going to play again, and you're still pitching shutouts. I just found that kind of interesting. But I think, I don't know, the Michigan's defense looks on paper really good. You feel like it's going to be, if I'm Michigan, I'm trying to keep it a lower plays game. I don't want, Ewers and Manning throwing it 40 times, presumably Ewers, but you never know if Arch gets in the game. Yeah, I want to keep, and maybe that's what Vegas is thinking. I want to keep this low plays, run a lot of time. I don't want to get in a shootout with them because that's a nightmare if you're Michigan. So
nightmare.
Yeah.
Nightmare.
I mean, the most points they let up last season was to Ohio State at 24 points. That was at the end of the season. But I mean, they had, I think, like 7 or 8 notable guys, move off that defense.
But
it's top linebacker, Junior Collison, DB. I feel like Chris Jenkins, he's a defensive tackle. So, it's an instance where we could hang a little bit more than 24 this year, I think. And I think our offense is talented enough.
Not to mention offense and defense in college football. It is complementary football is king always. JJ McCarthy is heralded as one of the best game man. All I heard last year was he's just a game manager. He's just a game manager. Well, guess what? That kept the defense fresh when they needed to go on the football field and do exactly what they did. And that was dominate game in, game out, and only give up 24 points at max. So if they're just asking so many questions right now after one game against Fresno State, where really it was 13-3 until the fourth quarter. Like, you want to talk about Georgia starting slow, Josh, or even us in some respect, and some of these other teams that wound up winning by 50 points but pitching a shutout. That happened actually a lot, which you would expect in week one. They still have, it's not like they're going into week 2 with things figured out. We went into week 1 just not knowing who the guys were going to be.
Yeah.
But we looked prepared. We looked well coached. We looked ready to execute. So that's why I feel confident knowing that we're going to go into week 2, not asking a ton of different questions. It's just a matter of who catches the passes. Like, we're talking about our tight end, like which tight end is going to get more reception. Like and it's obviously a lot easier when you play Colorado State instead of Fresno State, I guess.
Yeah, but they're fine. Like, that's why we jumped Oregon. We jumped Oregon.
Yes, right.
Yeah. For
a reason, man. We probably should have jumped Ohio State. Like, the 3 best teams in the nation to me, I know their opponents are tricky some of them are easier than others, obviously. The 3 best teams in the nation, I truthfully think, are Georgia, Texas, and Alabama until I see Ohio State click.
Yeah, I don't think I disagree with you.
It's hard.
All right, I'm gonna go Josh, Nick, Toss. Final regular season record for Texas.
Come on, man. Come on, dude. We're running it. I have to believe that.
You're beating Georgia.
I have to believe that. I have to believe
it is in your house.
I have to believe it's at our house. I mean, I would never pick us against Georgia. As good as they are, as good as Kirby is. We were one play away from going to the national championship last year. We were a couple fumbles away. Our best player, Jonathan Brooks, went down, man. I have to believe that this team is the best team we've had since Colt McCoy and Vince Young were in the burnt orange. Since our co-host Quan Cosby, shout out to him and his family, were in the burnt orange. I have to believe that this is the year. We have Georgia at home. We don't have Bama on the schedule. We don't have Ole Miss on the schedule. We don't have Auburn or Tennessee on the schedule. We don't even have LSU on the schedule. Like, I have to believe that this is our shot. Have to.
Yeah, I'm with him. I mean, I'm not going to pick against them at all this season. I mean, yes, the Georgia game can get a little dicey, but it is at home. And, a lot can change from now until then. We still got a few weeks. The OU game's one that you always got to circle to because it doesn't matter who's ranked where. Doesn't matter who's ranked where. It's neutral ground. There's a lot of bad blood that's always in that rivalry game. So that's one you always got to look over your shoulder on. They were the team that did beat us last year in regular season. And then, God, I hate to say this, but you have to look at the A&M game because that game means a lot more to them than it means to us. Yeah, Kyle Field,
Arkansas too.
Yeah, there's a target on our back every game we play.
Yep.
I mean, I'm sure Vandy's circling our game as well, but I'm not going to necessarily say that.
Vandy's got that series edge, guys. You got a way to go to make that one up. You know that, right?
Yeah.
Was it like 8-3, 8-3, something like that?
You would know, Chris. You would know better. We haven't thought about that one in a while.
This is one of those preseason media notes that I think we can have some fun with that before.
No, you have
Vandy
to.
week, but
we'd love to.
But I haven't played a century, but still,
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, I have us going undefeated.
I will differ from the two gentlemen. When we made our preseason picks before we played one game, I actually had us at 10-2. But after 1 week, I'm making an addendum. I'm adjusting that to 11-1. I do think Georgia is not only the number one team, but until I see otherwise, they're the number one team by a margin. And it'll be an excellent game. Now, the thing about that Oklahoma game is that we've got 5 weeks of play till we get them. They're the number 15 team in the nation right now. If they keep winning, it might be number 2 versus number 6. So
yeah.
And then I feel even less confident about that game because it is such a massive rivalry and such a crapshoot just year in, year out. We've beaten them when they've been better than us. They've beaten us when we've been better than them. Yeah. But I will say on the A&M thing, I'm definitely scared. I don't want their offense was horrific in that game, but they have a very talented defense. And while I don't believe that Wegman quarterbacked a good game, I actually think Riley Leonard's a pretty decent quarterback, and he had to play some tough, gritty football. And that Notre Dame team is well coached. I like Marcus Freeman. I think he's a good coach. I think he's a good leader. In both those defenses. I mean, that was they grinded out. They're not in the SEC, obviously Notre Dame, but that felt like a 6 years ago SEC defensive type of battle. So I know A&M's going to bring it, but I do feel confident that our offense is so much better than their offense. And again, we got to see more tape in the season play out. But that was the game before, Chris, where I was like, I feel like they could sneak one. And if it's not them, it's the Arkansas game, like Josh mentioned, on the road. But now I feel very confident that we can head to the SEC championship only having lost one game against Georgia. Either way, 10-2, 11-1, undefeated, like these guys mentioned, we're going to the college football playoff.
And then it's anyone's game. I am circling. You guys keep talking about OU. I didn't bring them up. I am circling OU versus Tennessee on my calendar.
Oh, I think that's one of the games of the year.
Must watch, very telling game for SEC play. But if we're sitting here thinking we're going into the defending national champions' house, regardless of who they return or not, and we're absolutely pumping them, I have to believe that we're going all the way. or what are we doing here? Or what was the show?
Well, gentlemen, it's been fun. I think we talked about doing 30 or 45 minutes. Should have known we'd go in an hour, but that's all good. It was great. It was fun. And Nick, I know you talked about your coverage, all the radio stuff you guys do. Tell folks where they can find all your coverage of the Michigan game this week.
Yeah, so if you live in the Austin or Central Texas area, we're on ESPN Austin. Josh, it's
102.7. 102.7.
102.7 ESPN Austin every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Pre-game for the kickoff for the Horns, and then 10 a.m. On Sunday to preview NFL. And then if you want to take a look at us on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Stripe Sports. We're always there, having some fun with sports talk. And then the Horns Up Talking Texas podcast with Quan Cosby. So a lot of resources there for you to listen to our pretty voices and see our pretty faces.
Well, it's always fun. And, of course, the SEC coverage you can get here. We cover football, baseball, basketball in the league, wall to wall. Go to YouTube. Southeastern 16 is where you get all your stuff. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the like button. And Caroline.Smith@southeastern14.com for your advertising inquiries. Thanks to Nick and the crew for joining us today. I'm Chris Lee of Southeastern 16, presented by BetOnline. Thank you for watching.